How you doing, guys? Welcome back to more UK Trucking Diaries. I'm KevTee, thank you very much for watching. We've just pulled up in the... I'll close that window. We've just pulled up in the services, so I thought it'd be a good chance to talk to you about driving time and working time directive. I've had a lot of questions about it. People are a little bit confused about combining driving time with working time and driver's hours with working time directive, and yeah, I thought I'd do a video. Quick disclaimer, I'm only going to do an overview. This is only going to be the basics that will get you through your working week. There's lots of details that you'll come across that you'll need to either ask questions or do a bit of digging around yourself, but there's lots of scenarios that that differ for different jobs. So yeah, I'm going to give you the basics, and you know, the least that you need to know to get you through your week, really. So we will start off with driver's hours. With driver's hours, you can do a maximum of 56 hours a week, but you can't do that every single week. You can only do a maximum of 90 hours in 2 consecutive weeks. So that means that if on the first week you do 56 hours, which is your maximum, you can only do 34 hours the next week. And this is driving time. This isn't time at work or anything else. This is purely just driving time. So 56 hours a week maximum, and you can only do 90 hours in 2 consecutive weeks. So you need to remember that, because it's quite easy to do 50 hours 2 weeks in a row, and you can't do that because that equals 100 hours in 2 consecutive weeks. You can do 9 hours driving a day, and you can extend that to 10 hours twice a week. No more. Only twice a week you can extend it to 10. So your normal day will be a maximum of 9 hours driving. Daily rest, you must have at least 11 hours daily rest. This can be reduced to 9 hours 3 times a week. So next week I've got 3 nights out, so those 3 nights I'll have 9 hours off. If I was doing a 4th night out, then I'd have to have 11. So that, yeah, that's the minimum that you can have is 9 off 3 times a week. All the rest must be 11 hours. For your weekly rest, you must have 45 hours off a week, and that must be after a maximum of 6 shifts. You can't do 7 shifts and then have your weekly rest. You must do a maximum of 6 shifts. So you have your 45 hours off, but every other week that could be reduced to 45 hours. But before the 3rd week, you must repay that back on top of your 45 hours. So if you have a 24-hour rest period, and then you have a 45-hour rest period, you must repay back the time that you didn't have on your first break, your first rest period, on top of your 45 on the 3rd week. So you'd have 45 hours off plus 21 hours, so you'd have 66 hours off if you reduced your first week down to 24-hour rest period. So yeah, it sounds quite complicated, but it's not. If you have 24, you must pay back what you owe up to the 45 hours by the 3rd week. So the way to make it easy is you can work every other Saturday, for instance, and that's what I do. I work every other Saturday at the moment, and then by the time when I'm having my 45 hours, by the time I finish Friday evening and start again Monday, mid-morning Monday, I've covered the 66 hours off that's needed to repay back the week before where I worked the Saturday. So yeah, like I said at the beginning, after 6 consecutive 24-hour periods after your last weekly rest period. So that means that it's not a fixed week with your weekly rest. It doesn't have to be on a weekend, but it must fall a maximum of 6 hours after your last weekly rest. So if you have your weekly rest on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, you can work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday before you have to have your next weekly rest. And that's providing you've not gone over your driving hours, obviously. And then the last thing to cover on your driver's times or driving hours is your break times during the day. Now you must have 45 minutes break every 4.5 hours of driving. So before you reach your 4 hours and 30 minutes, you must have 45 minutes break. Now that can be broken up to a 15 and then a 30, but it cannot be a 30 then a 15. Your second break must be at least 30 minutes. So you can have a 30 and a 30, that's fine, but you can't have a 30 and a 15. If you're going to break it up, it must be 15 and at least a 30, or at least a 15 and at least a 30. They can be over, but that's the minimums. So you must make sure that they total 45 minutes or over before you hit 4.5 hours driving. And that's it. That's the basics for the driving hours. Now we get to Working Time Directive, or WTD, and this is where people get confused trying to combine the two, the driving hours with Working Time Directive, because they work alongside each other. And the basics about Working Time Directive is making sure that if you're not doing a lot of driving, you're not going to exceed working times. So your weekly working average should not exceed 48 hours. Now that's an average, so you can be over some weeks, you can be under some weeks, but as long as your average is not over 48 hours, and that's over a reference period of 17 weeks. Now that can be extended up to 26 weeks, but there must be an agreement in place to do that. You can work up to a maximum of 60 hours in 1 week. Now, a vlog that I done last week, I worked 70 hours, but that was because it does not include any waiting time, time you spend on break, time that you spend on POA. That only includes driving time and other work. So if you do a lot of waiting around in a week, you know, like me, I can spend 4 or 5 hours on a bay. That can push you over to that max of 60 hours a week. But it doesn't matter because it doesn't count. POA and break doesn't count towards Working Time Directive. So when you've got that in place, then you've also got your daily breaks. And you cannot work more than 60 hours, 66. You cannot work more than 6 hours without a 15-minute break. And then if you're working between 6 and 9 hours, you must have a 30-minute break. If you're working more than 9 hours, you must have a 45-minute break. So that doesn't mean that you need to have a 15, a 30 and then a 45-minute break. That means that those breaks, you must have breaks totaling them times. And then what will also happen is, if you reach your driving time and have to have a 45-minute break before you reach your 6 hours working time, that 45-minute break will count towards your Working Time Directive, so you no longer have to take that Working Time Directive break before you get to 6 hours. Excuse me. But what that does mean is when you have that 45-minute break for your driving time, that resets the Working Time Directive. So if you do no more driving after that and you're on other work for 6 hours, you must have another 15-minute break before you get to those 6 hours. So it just means that you cannot go any driving time or working time over 6 hours without a 15-minute break. It doesn't, regardless, that's what you need to do. And that's all working time directive means. So your average must be below 48 hours. You can work a maximum of 60 hours, but that doesn't include working time and break. Oh, sorry, POA and break. It includes working time and drive time. You must have 15 minutes if you're working more than 6 hours. And between 6 and 9 you have a 30-minute break, and anything over 9 you must have a 45-minute break. The two other small points that come under working time directive, and if you're HGV driving, you come under working time directive as a mobile operative, which means you must have 5.6 weeks holiday a year. That doesn't include bank holidays, so you must have 5.6 weeks holiday a year. Also, you must have health checks if you're a night worker. Your employer must supply you with health checks if you work, I think it's between the hours of 10 at night and 4 in the morning, something like that. If you work at any point between those hours, so if you finish your shift at 11 o'clock, you'd be counted as that. Or if you started before 4 AM, you'd be counted as a night worker. So if you do any hours between those times, your employer must supply health checks for you. And that just about covers it. That's the basics. And that if you abide by those rules, that should get you through a working week. But like I said before, there's details where you're not sure of, and you'll have to ask a question or look it up. But if you follow those guidelines as an overview, you should be okay. And so yeah, I hope it's been helpful. If you found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe. I'll have how-to videos and guides and stuff like that coming out most Sundays, if I don't run out of guides and how-tos. But yeah, I hope it's helped you out, and if you need to know anything else or you have any questions, put it in the comments and I'll try and answer as soon as I can. Hit the subscribe button, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I'll see you in the next one.